You've already mentioned this next film, and for some reason you do two words,
Silver Linings
in an ordinary
Playbook.
word, and then this.
Well, when I saw it, I mean, I hadn't seen the poster when I first saw it. I saw it, a month or a couple of months ago now, and it was called Silver Linings Playbook. If you see the posters, it appears to be called Silver Linings, and then Playbook is written in very small letters underneath. And I'm not entirely sure what the theory behind that is. Clearly, that I take a guess that they've decided to call it Silver Linings to play up the, hey, because
Every cloud has it.
Yes, I suppose so. And maybe they think that playbook doesn't mean something.
Silver Linings Playbook doesn't really make sense as a phrase. I'm kind of assuming that I was hoping that your review would put it all into context.
No, that ain't going to happen.
Okay.
No, but then when I saw the side of Silver Linings Playbook, I thought, okay, fine, that's a quirky, interesting title, but I didn't have a, it wasn't that it's not like John Carter of Mars. Taking the word away isn't going to completely change the meaning of the title. Silver Linings means as much or as little as Silver Linings Playbook. But it seems to me that in saying Silver Linings, and you've seen the poster, which is,
I haven't seen the poster. Describe the poster.
Well,
it's got a lion on it.
No, it hasn't got a lion on it. Thank you. It's got two faces. It's, looking sort of like, and Silver Linings. So it looks kind of upbeat. So it's directed by David O. Russell, taken from a novel by David Quick. And David O. Russell did things like Three Kings, I Heart Huckabees, The Fight. I mean, to say that his output is of changeable quality is, to understate just how massively changeable it is. He famously, when he was doing Three Kings, got into a fight with George Clooney. This story was repeated sort of, on the press in, various different ways, that he was antagonising George Clooney and saying, go on, hit me. And George Clooney did. George Clooney lamped him. And as we all know, George Clooney is quite a hard bloke to get on the wrong side of, because whatever else he is, he's spectacularly genial. So David O. Russell, a changeable playbook not playbook, what's it called? Worksheet, charge sheet, roll sheet, what do you call it?
Charge sheet.
Charge sheet. Okay. So the story here is Bradley Cooper.
Shopping list.
Your mate Bradley Cooper, who you interviewed and got on very well with.
He was a nice chap.
Yeah, sure. Pat Solitano recently emerged from a psychiatric institution whence he was sent following a bipolar diagnosis after an unfortunate incident with his estranged wife's lover. He's convinced that his estranged ex-wife is waiting for him to get better and therefore reunite, this despite a restraining order. He moves in with his mum and dad, Jacki Weaver and Robert De Niro, the latter of whom, Robert De Niro, is obsessed with, he's an obsessive compulsive illegal gambler who worries about the way in which his TV remotes are put down on the thing. So there is an idea that there is a sort of, obsessive compulsive thing running through the family. He meets Jennifer Lawrence's character, who has herself descended into self-destructive addiction since her husband's death and is also on medication. Here's a clip.
Do you want to share this?
Why did you order Raisin Bran?
Why did you order tea?
Because you ordered Raisin Bran.
I ordered Raisin Bran because I didn't want there to be any mistaking it for a date.
It can still be a date if you order Raisin Bran.
It's not a date.
So you get the sense of the tone of the film. And so what then happens is he discovers that she's a friend of his ex, and he thinks that she can pass a note to his ex to say, hey, look, I'm fine, I'm better now, let's get back together again. She says to him, well, okay, I will only do that if, plot contrivance ahoy, you become my dance partner for a dance competition which is coming up in the future, which I need to do. So therefore I will indeed act as your intermediary in a kind of sub-Shakespearean fashion, but you have to take part in this dance thing with me, and inevitably there will be a clash between the dancing on the one hand, between his father's obsessive compulsive sports gambling on the other, and all these things will come together. Now, when you look at it and when you describe it, as I just have done, it sounds really kind of grisly, because it sounds like, on the one hand, a film which is dealing with mental illness in a way which appears to be, a classic Academy Awards pitch, salvation through dancing, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And some critics have chosen to dismiss the film as utterly cynical. I think that to do that is to look at the movie rather than to watch it, or to look at the poster rather than to actually engage with the film. Because the fact of the matter is, it's nothing like as cynical as people have made it out to be, even though it is demonstrable that when you just look at it there as a charge sheet or a shopping list or whatever it is you want to say, or a playbook, it does have all these points of actors saying, ooh, Academy, look at me, of things being dealt with in a quirky way, and of dancing and redemption, salvation and romance, and a poster which basically sells you the smiley, happy silver linings part of it. And the thing it reminded me of was this. There was a film a while ago called Mr. Jones with Richard Gere, and it was taken away from the director. And the director tells this terrific story about the film is about a guy who's manic depressive. And he tells this story about in the middle of a meeting one day with the executives. The executive said, look, this whole thing about him being manic depressive, could he not just be manic? And that was kind of their way of selling it, that the guy is just manic. Now, in many ways, what you get with the central Bradley Cooper performance is that. It is the just manic. It's the big, full-on, full wattage, that which to some extent could be seen as very annoying. The reason it isn't annoying is that it's actually rather brilliantly mediated by Jennifer Lawrence, who is a fantastic actress and does a really good job of making that role work in ways that you wouldn't expect it would. Equally, the Robert De Niro character, who's playing this kind of obsessive compulsive father who's always fretting about the TV remotes being in the right place, you could see that as Robert De Niro doing a sort of typical twitchy performance, in a mannered performance in the way that he sometimes does when he's sort of soft pedaling. But you put that in the same room as Jacki Weaver, and suddenly her performance of the mother attempting to bring everything down, make the food, bring some kind of normality back to the family, makes it okay. And then in the middle of it all, you've got Chris Tucker. And Chris Tucker, who in the past has been, incredibly annoying, isn't annoying. He's actually... I wasn't sure that I'd ever use these words together, but he is oddly engaging. And in many ways, the fact that he isn't annoying is a measure of how the movie plays. The movie has a number of tropes and quirks which, looked at from the outside, could add up to a formulaic, cynical, give me an award crowd pleaser. But actually, that's not the experience of watching the movie. And strangely enough, as I was watching it, I thought, I'm being won over by this. And immediately you start thinking, well, am I being won over because it's manipulative? Am I being won? No, I'm being won over because actually it's kind of working its charm in a strange way.
Can I just ask you about that?
Yeah.
Manipulative, isn't that what a movie would do anyway?
Yes.
What's wrong with
exactly
being manipulated?
Well, exactly. The manipulative is not necessarily bad. I mean, sentimentality. I mean, I myself have an aversion to obvious sentimentality if it's done badly, but I have nothing to do with sentimentality if it's done well. All movies are manipulative. I mean, this came up with Steven Spielberg when we were asking whether his movies are sentimental and manipulative, and he said, "Yeah, that's the point of cinema. It manipulates you in a sentimental way, and that's what it does." In the case of this, I mean, also there's been some question about whether or not it's using mental illness, as a film in order to attract the attention of the Academy, and whether it's skirting over the issue. Here's the thing: it is not about that. It is not a film about mental illness. But you can ask legitimate questions. Does it feature? I mean, almost everybody in the movie is in some way touched by or affected by mental illness. Fine. Are those characters laughed at because of that? No. Are those characters invested with, cheap dramatic qualities as a result of that? No. Is the movie somehow making gross generalizations that will somehow, demean the understanding of these very real? No, not really. No. I mean, no, actually, not really. No, not at all. That's not what it's doing. It is a drama in which several of the characters are affected in various forms by mental illness, as people are in everyday life. And actually, one of the things the film is very clear to do is to say that it's all to do with gradations. That in fact, compulsive thoughts and other things are not just confined to people who are diagnosed as being outside of the psychiatric norm. So my feeling was, yes, it is possible to look at this and to say, okay, it's just cynical, it's just manipulative, it's just calling out for Oscars and doing all those things. Yes, you can say that. To do that is to actually be strangely cynical, because the fact of the matter is the experience of watching the movie is not that. And I say that as somebody who went in fundamentally, as I said with David O. Russell, it could go either way. It could go, I mean, I Heart Huckabees was like, knuckle-chewingly difficult to watch. And Bradley Cooper, I've not been a fan of in the past, although I think he's done some, more interesting work than others. But the film did win me over, and I think one of the reasons it did was because the women's roles mediate those sort of things, and it actually, in the end, you end up going, okay, fine. And there is, I'll say this, there is a kind of Rocky thing going on in it as well, and it remembers the Rocky rule. The Rocky rule being, it's not... Well, you know what the Rocky rule is. If I say it, I'll give it away. But it remembers the Rocky rule in a good way.